everybody, it's Clarissa here. You are back in the limelight, and today yet another superb superstar that I have recently met that I want you to know about, because what she does, I think, is kind of like one of the coolest things on the planet. And especially for those of us that are traveling, I think that you're going to be able to relate to the last 16 years of her life and what she's been doing. In the meantime, I do want to remind you to like, share, and subscribe. You're going to be seeing the video on YouTube. You're going to be listening to the podcast thanks to our friends over at Inspired News Radio on Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, and Stitcher has been added. So that's a really cool new addition. In the meantime, you'll remember that over on issue.com and in the limelightmedia.com, you get to take a look at the digital version of the In the Limelight magazine. I only print one just for posterity, but you can go take a look at the digital version over there. You're going to love it. Again, lots of information. I call it intelligent media for the savvy entrepreneur. Okay, with that having been said, we're going to bring on today's guest. As I said before, I gave you a little bit of a heads up that she travels a lot. When I tell you a lot, she's kind of really all over the place, and she does what she loves, which is what we all should be doing. And I love what she does and wish that I could do what she does, but I can't. So we're going to bring her on now and say hello to Christensen. There she is from Day1Yoga, everybody. So you want to go over to Day1Yoga while we're watching this and take a look at some of the amazing work that she does. She has been, I think, in yoga. You're going to give me a little bit of background and history, Day, but I think it's somewhere along the line of 16 years you've been in yoga.
Yeah, that's right. I started practicing in 2004, and I've been, for the majority of what I've done, I've studied a style of yoga called Ashtanga Yoga, which it brought me to India a few times or more. And and then basically I started through my teaching and through my experience practicing, I started understanding that basically this style of yoga calls for doing a practice 6 days a week. And it's basically doing the exact same practice unless you become really, really advanced. It's basically asking you to do the exact same sequence of movements 6 days a week, which I started to understand that there's repetitive movement injuries that will happen. And it's similar to doing something like if somebody carries a briefcase to work every day, or if somebody carries a messenger bag, doing the exact same thing every day will start to lead to postural problems or injuries or pain or other things. So I started to understand a little bit about some of the potential problems that come along with repetitive movement. And I started to develop my own style of yoga from that.
Right. Wow. That's extraordinary. And so why this type of yoga, and talk about the method a little bit more that you went ahead and created.
Yeah. So initially the practice that I was talking about before is Ashtanga Yoga, and I was attracted to it because it's a really strong athletic practice. There's a lot of jumping involved. There's a lot of moments in the practice where you're asked to hold your body weight on your hands. That doesn't necessarily mean handstanding, but it could mean that.
Right.
And I was attracted to that athletic and challenging part of it. But as I said, I started to understand that there's certain problems with doing a practice like that, and mainly being that there are really deep yoga postures that are involved in this series. So what I've really started to discover and work on my own, which the Day1Yoga method sort of embodies or encompasses, is that strength building is really okay, but becoming the most flexible person in the world actually has a lot of downfalls. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
What kind of downfalls? Wow. Okay. I don't know if I want to be downfalling when I'm doing yoga. That doesn't sound good. Have you been hurt? I'm sure you. I mean, have you sustained any injuries? Yeah.
I think that any time that you do anything, whether it's like any physical activity, so in sport, if you run or jog or swim or play volleyball or whatever it is you do, typically there's some aches and pains that are involved. But what I started noticing, a very big part of the culture in the yoga world. Ashtanga and yoga in general is really emphasizing and kind of glorifying deep, deep back bends. So just as an example, I'll give you a little idea about why I think that doing extreme flexibility can be really dangerous, is that structurally, our spine is built for a certain amount of extension, which is 25 degrees. So our lumbar spine goes into 25 degrees of extension. Our cervical spine goes into like 70 degrees of extension. So you put that together and that should be your back bend. Also involved is hip extension and shoulder flexion and things like that. But what winds up happening is if somebody is really tight in their hips, or if somebody doesn't have the range of motion in their shoulders, what starts happening is that the structural element is compromised, meaning the structure, meaning your bones, your skeleton. And because we're only built for so much extension, once you start to go beyond that because of compensation, because let's say you don't have great shoulder flexion, your back or the areas in between your vertebrae, the discs, start to take the brunt of that work. So what happens is herniated discs. And most of the time people don't even know that this is happening to them. Or postural problems like anterior pelvic tilting or other issues. So there's all kinds of problems that you can kind of involve yourself in that you may not even know it's bad for you until it's too late.
Right. So speaking of too late, is this the kind of practice that someone sounds like to me, and I could be wrong, that you would want to start doing at a younger age?
Not necessarily, because sometimes when you're at the younger age and your body is, you do have full range of motion over your joints, your body is a little bit more flexible, that's actually when you can start to go into structural damage. Whereas when you're older, there's muscle stiffness, sometimes there's injuries or scar tissue or whatever that would prevent full range of motion. And sometimes being a less flexible person would actually save you from some of the potential postural problems or injuries that might occur from doing a long-term practice. So yeah, a lot of people, I think that's an interesting misconception, is that a lot of people think, well, I'm not flexible and I'm never going to be flexible, so I'll just check yoga off my list. It's probably when you need it the most. It's those cute 20-year-old flexible yoga girls that actually might be in more trouble.
Okay. So, oh, that's an interesting concept. I would have never thought of it that way. So there's hope for me then. Okay, that's good to know. But I mean, so people, you're traveling all over the world, and I want you to tell us a little bit more about that. And you have a class in front of you. Are you able to understand the capabilities of everyone in the room? In other words, are your classes broken into, simple, medium, and hard, or something like that, so that you know how far you can work people, or is it just an all one uni and then you just kind of do what you can do?
You know what? It's there's two ways that I can answer that question. Number one is that 9 times out of 10, or the majority, 60-70%, I want to say, of what I do when I go teach is actually go and lecture. So I'm not teaching necessarily yoga classes, what you're familiar with, a yoga teacher standing in front of a room and a bunch of people doing all these kind of exercise, movement, contortion type things.
Right.
What I'm doing is basically going out and giving seminars. My main thing, like the thread in my entire teaching, is an idea about muscle imbalance. You may have heard of the difference between tonic and phasic muscles. So that's
not me.
Okay. So
educate me, Day. Educate me.
So basically, the idea, I'll give you a really short, quick example about muscle imbalance. The idea that you have a strong muscle and a weak muscle on either side of a joint. So the easiest way to understand that is to talk about your biceps and your triceps. So if you understand the role of these two muscles, you know that your bicep puts your elbow joint into flexion, whereas your tricep puts your elbow joint into extension. So because if now what I would do is maybe ask the room full of people to look down at your elbows, chances are your elbows are bent, right? Now imagine that like 90% of your day, your elbows are probably bent.
Right.
So that's what I mean by muscle imbalance, that you have always a strong muscle on the side of the joint. And that bit of muscle imbalance is normal. But what happens as we age is that we start to like you can imagine, like an older person, maybe in their 80s or 90s, walking with a cane. What starts to happen is that our posture is affected by those muscle imbalances, because when we're young, relatively, that muscle imbalance is like just relatively more or less even. Of course, the more you live, the more living you do, the stronger those muscles become that are more often used, typically on the side of flexion of the joint.
So how is your style of yoga different than a lot of the other, I don't know much about yoga, but I know, you know, the hatha yogas and the watha yogas and the whatever yogas. And so I know there are different types, just different styles, different methods, but how is yours different from the others?
Well, I don't know if it's super different, but it is a very strong athletic practice, or it could be. But one of the things that I do is I tailor the teaching, and this is definitely taken from my years doing Ashtanga, is that when I have a room full of people, a room full of students, even though there's maybe 20 or 30 people in front of me, I work with each student one-on-one. So the way that I'm able to do that is that there's like a sequence of postures that everybody comes in and does, but I'm able to observe any sort of issues that they may have, or I can see patterns of how they're moving or whatever. And I can say, you know what, you really have this tendency. You lean to the left, you lean to the right, you do a lot of spinal extension. And then I can change their practice so that ultimately what I'm talking about, muscle imbalance, starts to become balanced. So that's the main thing, is that I can work with each student one-on-one, even if I have like a huge classroom full of people, and I can still work to the individual. Whereas most yoga, it's the other way around. It's like sort of a top-down thing where every single person in the room is going to try and bend their body into a specific shape. It's switched a bit.
Right. So what was it that made you decide to want to travel a lot and, you know, make your business a little bit more itinerant, as opposed to just staying in one place and having everybody come to you?
I don't know necessarily. It's kind of how the way that life took me. And also, like, if you know anything about how much yoga teachers make teaching yoga classes at a studio, it's not very much.
Okay.
And when you can become a bit of a novelty, or like, you know, or you have something that's special that you can bring to the table, something that's a little bit different, or something that's educational, and you can come from out of town or out of country and say, I'm offering this huge program that's going to change the way you think and the way you practice. That's how you can start like reaching people and changing people's minds, and of course make a little bit better living while you're doing it.
Well, I think it was also a branding decision on your part. You know, if you take a look at that, it's a little bit more of a celebritized, if you will, version. If you know, I think that's the perfect word for it, because, you know, we always are so much more interested and attracted to what doesn't come from our own backyard. And, you know, and it's really is, it's perception. Yeah. Sometimes, and I don't mean this in your case at all, but I sort of came up with a little saying of my own. It's kind of like perception deception, in the sense that, you know, I mean, we try to find that one thing, that hook that people are really going to be interested in. And it's true, if you will. I mean, I am sure that your type of method is something that you can't find everywhere. You've taken it to a different level. And I'm telling you, if you can, first of all, with Day1Yoga, you can see it on the ticker underneath, so you can go take a look. You can find Day there and follow along with her courses. I took a look at some of her YouTubes, and they are extraordinarily done. They are beautifully shot. I've already told her this. The cinematography, the place that she chose to do it in India. It is absolutely the whole experience of watching Day is bar none one of the most exciting things I think I've ever seen in yoga. And I've seen some yoga classes. I haven't been to many, but I've followed some online. And I've got to say that the way you have branded yourself, the way that you branded the imagery, the way that you branded your website, your logo, all of that, even the name, it's really, really, I feel really kind of extraordinary. Why the name Day1Yoga?
Oh, that's such a good question. Well, my name is Day, and there's a sort of a yoga book or Bible, sort of, so to speak, called the Yoga Sutras. And the first Yoga Sutra says something along the lines of now, emphasizing the word now. Now begins yoga. And then as you start to read some of the other sutras, part of that idea of now being in the present moment, and then not being attached to, let's say, what you did yesterday. So we hold these expectations of ourselves like, well, if I performed X, Y, and Z yesterday, the idea is that you should be able to perform that today and then some. So we have these really high standards or high expectations of ourselves. And a lot of times, whenever some of them are unrealistic, and a lot of times when we fall short, then that actually inhibits us from progressing because, oh, it's just a downward spiral of you get down on yourself or you get up or whatever. So part of the idea,
it's self-sabotaging us.
Exactly.
Self-sabotager, you know.
That's right. So the idea is that basically every single day is day one. You start as if it's your first day on the yoga mat, or it's your first, you know, it's like every day you have a chance to be reborn or invent yourself. You don't hold yourself to these sort of unrealistic expectations or standards. So that's a big part of it. Yeah.
So I'm going to ask the obvious question, but right now, everybody, I don't know exactly when you're going to be seeing this, but we're in the middle of COVID. So I was going to ask you when is your next event? But when is the next event that you think you might actually be able to get to?
Well, right now, the answer is everything is online live on my website. So I'm doing courses, not your typical yoga classes or course like I said, where you're necessarily practicing along. But I'm basically doing educational courses on, you don't have to practice yoga. I'm doing it on anatomy, biomechanics, functional movement, and basically the way that you can stay healthier longer. I think that the reason why everybody wants to do yoga, more or less, is that we want to sort of have that special yoga glow and have that longevity, like be older but look younger or feel younger. And a big part of that has to do with how we treat our bodies. So those are the types of courses that I'm giving, and you can do that live with me now. Who knows when we're going to be able to travel again?
But is that on Day1Yoga? Send everybody to Day1Yoga, right?
Yeah, Day1Yoga.com. Yeah.
Okay. And I wanted to say that Day1Yoga, there was a last question that I had for you. Can't remember exactly what that was right now. But is there anything that I didn't ask you that I know what I was going to ask you. Hold on one second. Are you a proponent of any specific diet?
Yeah, definitely. For sure. I think that we're really meant to be frugivores. So a lot of people in fitness say that eating too much fruit and too much sugar is bad for you. I pretty much live on fruit. And I'm vegan, and as often as I can be, raw vegan. So I'm really not raw vegan, but I aspire to be.
Right. Yeah. And so tell me about where you're getting your protein from.
The same place that cows and gorillas get their protein, from green leafy vegetables, grasses, and leaves, is where protein is built. So you have to understand, and this is a little bit of a political thing, but you have to understand that when you're eating an animal, the animal doesn't make protein. The animal gets their protein from vegetable sources. So it's like you're eating the middleman instead of going to the source. If you want protein, just eat some greens and there's your protein.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. I don't know what it was, but when I was a child, I couldn't do the meat thing, just couldn't do meat. Yeah. So, and I used to get yelled at a lot for that because they were, we're spending so much money on meat. And it was just one of those things that just wasn't going to happen. I think I brought it into this lifetime with me. But anyway, so with that having been said, I'm going to ask you the question now. What is it that I didn't ask you that you wanted to be asked?
I don't know, but as far as questions go, I don't know if you need to ask me anything else, but I will say this. I have students in their 70s. I have a woman who is 74 years old, and every time I see her when we work one-on-one, currently not happening. But when we work one-on-one, she does about 30 to 40 handstands every class in her 70s. So anybody who is listening or watching or looking at yoga or saying, oh, well, I'm in my 40s, I'm too old, or I'm in my 50s, I'm too old, or 60s. I have students in their 70s. I also have taught students in their 80s yoga.
Right. Wow.
The yoga.
Right, so no excuses. No excuses.
That's right.
Right? Is that the message? The very strong message there.
That's the
no
message.
Excuses, everybody. Everybody can be yogaing, and there's no reason you can't when you go over and visit Day at day1yoga.com. Any other ways they can follow you, keep in touch with you?
I'm very, very active on Instagram, and everything that I do on Instagram goes to Facebook. So if you prefer Facebook over Instagram, but yeah, I try and post. Currently, I'm posting every day, and a lot of information, not just pretty pictures, but I'm actually posting a lot of information on my stories as well. So
right at Day1Yoga there as well, and of course over at YouTube, because you really have to see Day in action to know what I'm talking about, why I'm so enthralled about meeting her one-on-one. And who knows if I'm not going to start picking up yoga myself. All right, Day, thanks so much again for your time. You're down in Miami, right?
I am, yeah.
How's everything down there?
We're waiting for the beaches to open, but we just had the parks open today. So we're doing all right.
All right, good to know. All right, thanks again for your time. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye now. Thanks for watching this episode of In the Limelight TV, intelligent media for the savvy entrepreneur. Please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to my channel and connecting with me on social. You can listen to this interview on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Stitcher. And you can also go to inthelimelightmedia.com to read our digital magazine.